Welcome to the Co-Away podcast, devoted to the idea that a team of people led by a good owner, sharing best practices in a culture based on trust and respect, will complete better projects. I'm Howie Ferguson. I'm the executive director of the Construction Owners Association of America, or COA. And today, thrilled to be talking to a longtime member, volunteer, and friend, which is Tony Aeck from the firm Lord Aeck Sargent. Tony, this is a really tough first question, but I'm gonna hit you with it anyway. Tell us the story of your incredible journey in a kind of a Reader's Digest form, if you will. How you came to know, and of course I know this story, but how you came to fall in love with architecture and what you've been doing the last 50 or 60 years.
Well, Howie, I had the good sense to choose good parents, and I was born to an interesting couple, actually. My mother was sort of an early cougar. She was 10 years older than my father, and she had an interior design business here in Atlanta. Uh, and in fact, in 1932, decorated the little White House for Franklin Roosevelt. And she needed a sign painted for her company, which was a small company of two, I think. And my father, a student at Georgia Tech in architecture, 10 years her junior, earning money on the side, painted it. She didn't like it. He turned it over and painted it again, tried to charge her double, and the rest is history. So he graduated from Tech and became a registered architect. And many years later, after their collaboration had been in force for quite a long time, I joined the practice after going to architecture school. And I, during the way, had a lot of jobs like running blueprints and running errands, and learned a fair amount through osmosis. But I would say I must be genetically predetermined to be in this design profession. My mother actually, along the way, became a Taliesin Fellow in 1940s in Taliesin East, and my father was away designing air bases for the military. So she did that on the interim basis. But I I have always enjoyed every aspect of it. I've been amazed that people would actually pay me to learn about their business, their profession, their mission, and I found that quite interesting. One last comment along that line to reinforce the genes. My son not only got one master's in architecture, but decided he needed two. So he has two masters, one from Georgia Tech and one from MIT. So it's clearly in the gene pool. So anyway.
That's fantastic. And does your son work with you, Tony, or he's doing something
No,
else?
my son is a principal for a firm in New York City, and he is in charge of building envelope, that
Okay.
area. And so, one of these days, I'm hopeful of getting him back here. But at the moment, he's married to a lovely young lady who has an art gallery in New York. So we've got a little ways to go until that becomes virtual. Maybe then maybe we'll get him. So
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, as well as I thought I knew you, I did not ever hear the story about your mom and dad meeting and the priceless gem about flip it over and try to charge your double. That's good stuff, man. Uh, that's
well,
a
during the Depression, he needed every nickel he
yeah.
could get, and in
Hmm.
fact, he worked at an all-night diner called the Yellow Jacket, appropriately because it was Georgia Tech, and he said he would throw away the top to the pint of whiskey that he and the other guy had, and because they knew they'd never need it again. And he took 7 years to get through a 4-year program at Georgia Tech because he slept through French class every morning for years and years till the prof finally said, Eck, if you'll leave, I'll pass you. And then he graduated.
That's good stuff. Please just
That's
get out of
one
my
way to do
room.
it. Yeah, geez.
Oh, that's fabulous. Okay, so Tony, given and for folks listening, trust me, having traveled with and spent time with Tony, there's so much richness and humor to other things. He's told you the very short version of that great story. Fast forward through all that to right now, Tony, and you've been through, and your firm has been through about every imaginable up and down and crisis and change and all that other stuff. All that said, right now in 2023, and maybe looking forward a little bit, what is I hate the phrase "what keeps you up at night," but what's your biggest concern, maybe internally or externally these days? Recently, last 24 months, coming out of COVID, maybe it was the market or supply chain, or maybe it's more of a people thing now. Maybe it could be anything. What's your number one or top two kind of concern in the practice these days?
Well, Howie, I think you may be aware at this stage in my career, in addition to, I run some projects and I help promote some projects, but I also I'm sort of the firm's counselor with respect to contracts and risk and all. And my partner, Larry Lord, now retired from the firm, used to refer to me as the professional hand wringer, but that old saying about if you're not parent if you don't think they're out not out to get you, you're not paranoid. I said that backward, but I there are just so many places that risk comes from or issues come from, that I'm constantly trying to anticipate so that the projects go well, so that the teams can focus on the creative aspects and not on defending themselves.
Hmm.
And so if in this last little bit, and I've been through 7 recessions, so to go back to your question, um, certainly I'm always looking over my shoulder or around the corner for one that might come. That said, right now I'm told that we feel like we're very solid through all of 24, based on what we presently have. So that's a good place to be in a profession where I've seen backlog be fractional years, if at all. So that's certainly one general area of risk, and right now I'm not worried about that part. Although we do practice in various sectors, and with the interest rates being what they are, one or two of those sectors is softer than I'd like to see, but still there's backlog, and so I'm not that worried yet. The other is simply the transference of risk, what I would say inappropriately, or the efforts to do that, to transfer it to the profession, to make the architect's insurance the gap closer in some cases. And so I try to, in the spirit of the COA way, I try to negotiate on behalf of the firm fair and balanced contracts. I'm not trying to sound like Fox News, but I'm trying to, see that it's a 3 legs of the stool, and we're working together in the COA way to deliver good work.
Okay. Um, Great answer. And I had temporarily actually kind of forgotten, even though we talked about it 10 minutes ago, about your role within or as kind of the risk manager, hand wringer, as Larry said, for the firm. Um,
Yeah, and
let me
that quote is that I couldn't get out was, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. That it came back.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. They both can be true. Um, where I thought you might go, Tony, is where some other folks we've talked to went, and I shouldn't have presupposed, but other folks, whether they're owners, builders, designers, are worried as much about internal things, particularly about talent, keeping it, well, first recruiting it and onboarding it and training that talent, and then retaining it. We're all being asked to do, the Navy, when I was back as a naval officer, had this awful phrase called do more with less, which is a nice way of saying you're not getting any more help, do more. So so along those lines, Tony, where are things now? Again, this may not be with your risk manager hat on. This may be more with your boss leader hat on. Where are things with y'all in terms of talent? Uh, how do you find the best talent, and not necessarily technical, the right cultural fit for Lord Aeck Sergeant? And what do y'all do to try to keep the good folks with you?
Okay. Well, and I should, I should say that I certainly perceive it to be a risk management issue if
Mm,
you can't recruit or you don't keep good talent, and you don't have the continuity or the experience. So I am focused on that all the time, and I do think we have a pretty strong culture established. The firm has been in continuous practice since 1942 or three, and so we've been doing something right over a long period of time about culture. That said, we of course uh, we have summer internship programs where we bring people, talented people in and introduce them to the firm, and oftentimes they are interested in coming permanently with us, and we find that to be a great way to have people stay longer because they know pretty much what they're getting because they've experienced it in an
mhm,
upfront and close way. So that's good. We are certainly using social media to talk about not only the designs and the interesting projects, but the values that they exhibit. We do we do a lot of give back. I won't call it pro bono, although there's a fair amount of that, but there's low bono, as the term I learned recently. And we do a lot of things with the community, and that's very important to the generations that are coming into the profession now. And then we've had a long focus on employing technology uh, to enhance our firm was the first firm in the Southeast to buy a CAD system. We bought a CAD system in 1979, so
mm,
we have been at the front of technology for a long time, and younger people like technology. They're very conversant with it. In fact, they help people like me survive in the present climate. And so I've read recently one of the things about there's the parallel in construction, the parallel challenges of getting workforce and keeping workforce and competing with manufacturing.
mhm,
And I've been reading that the technology that's now sort of pouring into construction is certainly helping with the recruiting of the younger people into construction. So I think it's just analogous to what's happening in architecture as well.
mhm. Yeah, agreed. Um, All right, so I'm gonna pivot a little bit, sort of. This may come back to a people, talent, culture thing, Tony, but may not. Depends on your answer. So there's the usual. This is nothing new here, right? When we talk about projects, from the owner's perspective, or really from anyone's perspective, there's kind of the big three when it comes to measuring success, right? There's, in some order, cost, budget, how we do there, schedule, and then scope or quality. And there's the old axiom, which most of us, I know you and I don't really care for. Our friend Mike Kennick, you can only have two, can't have all three. Well, besides those three, and for a firm like y'all's or a builder, profitability would be another measure. But besides all of those, what are other ways that Lord Aeck Sargent measures success? In other words, you have a project, let's say that it was on time and under budget, and the scope and quality are great, and y'all made a profit. That sounds great. Sounds like a win, 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 win. But are there other ways in 2023 that projects are gauged to be successful or not?
So, when you started asking the question, something flashed into my memory and it stemmed from my former partner, Larry Lord, deciding we should do a customer or a client survey one time.
Hmm.
And I said, Larry, we don't want to do that. That's what firms do when they think the clients are unhappy. And, let's don't, oh, no, we need to do it so we can be better and, continuous improvement, et cetera. And so lo and behold, we did that. And I've always remembered one response that came back that was particularly great. And it was from a client who said, well, Lord Aeck Sargent is the least pain in the ass architects we ever deal with. And I thought, now there's a measure of success.
Put
And
that on a t-shirt. Yeah.
well, I've more than once suggested, instead of technological expertise and great service, et cetera, that we have that as a mantra, but nobody's taken me up on it yet.
That's
But
that's fabulous. Yeah.
That is
You could
wonderful.
even use the PETA acronym. We're the smallest PETA you'll ever deal with. That's a fabulous story, and that's two Larry Lord references already,
Sure.
by the way. But kidding aside, that actually maybe you're not kidding. It's funny, but it's like another way to say that in a non-humorous way is y'all do your job and you're not high maintenance, because there are some design firms that are that way. What about things like, and I'm not trying to ask a leading question, Tony, but going back to the generational thing and people wanting more of a sense of fulfillment and joy and happiness in their work, is any of that kind of baked in these days too?
Well, going back in a way, taking that question and the predecessor, we a year or two ago, tried to relook at where we're going and do a strategic view downstream, and there were a lot of different ideas. In fact, so many it was almost overwhelming, and they
Hmm.
were grassroots stakeholder or grassroots germinated. And I kind of weighed in and said, let me just explain that I haven't been in the business a long time, that you can't decide you're going to be a profitable firm. That's not what you have to decide, is that you're going to be a firm that is in demand and adds value for clients. And if so, the clients will be happy to hire you and pay you. And from that, everything else flows. And so putting a strong emphasis on design. And I might add, um, we don't view sustainability as something else, or wellness as something else. Design is whatever it needs to be to do what the client needs you to do for them. Yes, if you can add value, and in some cases even maybe lead them in a direction that they may not be fully aware is in their best interest, then by all means we should know how to do that and advocate for it. But anyway, long story short, I think our emphasis on design and good service has been a great bellwether for us over the years, and is something that the next generations or the people here respond to year in and year out.
Fair enough. Yeah, and I would say I was trying to do the math, even as a civil engineer, Tony. It was out of my grasp at this moment to both listen and do the math on. Tell me again the founding year of Lord Sergeant. 32,
43. Yeah,
Ni-
43.
1943.
1943. Yeah.
Okay. So 57 and 23. Yeah, I'd say an 80-year track record says that something's probably working right. Um, yeah, I think the jury is in, to use a legal reference. Um, Going to something else that, again, I'm thinking about folks listening to this, no matter how early or late in their career they are, we could all learn from each other, which is kind of what COA is all about, Tony. And I know you, and I think most people would say that you're one of the nicest, classiest, most genteel gentlemen that runs in the COA circles. So I'm really interested in your answer to this.
Well,
We
Howie,
all
wait a minute.
have,
Let me stop you before you, and I'll just
okay,
say I had a great friend, and unfortunately, he passed away, and his wife, who had quite a salty sense of humor, and not disrespecting her husband, but people would say, Jim was just a fabulous guy. And Leah would say, "Yeah, well, you had to get to know him to dislike him." And so, I'm sure there's some people that
Oh,
dislike
that's
me.
hilarious. I think that's
right.
more of a wife saying though, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry,
That,
I didn't mean to interrupt your train of thought, but
no, it's all good. I can get back. That's fabulous. Yeah. Well, okay. So Tony seems like a classy, genteel. Well, you just don't know him. Okay. All kidding aside, Tony, we all have moments, and it could be an internal thing. It could be on a client, a project. It could be in your personal life, and I don't know that it makes a difference. But when you, Tony, get to a crossroads where there's something, there's a struggle, there's tension, there's um, a crisis, if you will, maybe not like a pandemic kind of, but like a work. Oh my God, we're late, or the client is pissed off, or whatever. How do you handle as a leader tension? And I'll give you an example to help the wheels turn. For me, my go-to usually, and it doesn't always work, it backfires, but it is humor. That's kind of where I go with a tense kind of moment, try to diffuse it, a little smart at, maybe a little self-deprecate. That's not everyone's style though. How do you handle tension?
uh, maybe that it's already can be discerned from this interview, but just like you do. Uh, I mean, I think you first off have to be straightforward and honest, and own the situation if it's your situation. But um, to humor is a way to get through it, and so that's seems funny in saying it in a very serious way to be humorous, but um, I think that is the human condition, and at least for me, and that's how. But the first part is try and be someone who's telling the truth in the situation and not blaming. Take responsibility for sure if it's your responsibility. I mean, I remember I had a geotechnical engineer calling me one time who made a order of magnitude error, resulting in a high-rise building sinking. I don't know how far it's sunk now. It's still existing, but
Oh,
sinking at 8 or 10 inches at the time. So the elevators, didn't work at the floors and all that. And
oh
he
boy.
came in and explained how the computer had made a mistake. And of course, I've never we've never worked with that geotech since.
Obviously.
It wasn't our building, by the way, but it's still, you know, uh, anyway, that's just an example.
Don't blame the software is what you're saying.
Right, right, yeah. Well,
Wow.
actually, maybe you just kind of reminded me, but we had a client in the early days, and interesting guy, And you know the Georgia State Financing and Investment Commission because of COA, and one of their leader was a COA board member for Georgia, or the chair for Georgia. Anyway, his predecessor at that agency used to blame had the old parable, and I don't know if it's Aesop or whatever, but it was the fox blames the trap. And I've always understood it's not, it's not the trap that got you caught. It's you went into the trap, and you own it. And
Right.
that that guy was described by a contractor I know as they said, working with Mr. John Sims is like being driven insane by an eminently fair person. I always thought that was a great description, but it was, I think it was, was it Truman that said, I don't give them hell, I just tell them the truth and they think it's hell. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's sort of Mr. Sims, but
Mr. Sims.
I,
That's
I
good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
digress.
That's a good digression. There's several keepers. I think if folks are listening, hopefully they're not driving. They're trying to write some of these down. Some pretty good ones. Last thing, Tony. Although we could go in so many other ways, including directions, including your fabulous wife. But in the interest of time,
You mean
and
my present wife of 47 years?
that would
That's
be
the
the
one.
one. Yep, your honor, her honor. This is the closest thing to, because I'm not been to the canned cliche kind of stuff, but I think with you, I wanted to make a point to ask this just because I think you're such a fascinating guy. There's no telling where you might go with this, humorous or not. So I'll ask it. The kind of cliche. What is some advice? Could be one piece of advice. Could be several things that the younger Tony, you wish you could give your younger self. If you could time travel back 40, 50 years, man, if only I had known A or XYZ, what is that advice you would have given your younger self?
uh, I would have probably advised myself for one reason, to focus more on. Well, let me back up just enough to qualify. You know, as time has gone on, um, projects have become increasingly complicated.
Mm-hmm.
I have a set of drawings from a hospital in 1940 that are, it must have been done before my father formed the firm, but it's 40 sheets of drawings. And now a page call system would have 40 sheets, and the set would be thousands. So a long-winded way of trying to get to the point. Buildings are so complex today, and some of them, that specializing might have been a path I should have taken in order to know more and more about less and less. Instead, and maybe it was self-indulgence, I chose a path of being a generalist, and it's enabled me to work on a transit station in Beijing, a national mosque in Nigeria, a solution to processing Mars rocks when brought back so they didn't theoretically contaminate and wipe out the human species. I mean, I've had the opportunity to work on an amazing array of interesting things. And so actually, I have no regrets about not being the lab specialist or the museum specialist, but it's
Mm-hmm.
certainly a conversation I've had with myself over time, including during recessions when, a particular segment dried up or many did. Because at that point, you want to be the very, very best in that if you want to stay busy. Because
Mm-hmm.
the also runs are not busy during those times. So anyway,
That's fabulous, Tony. That's a great answer. And because basically, I'll say back, your answer your advice to your younger self would have been what you ended up doing, which is stay general. Don't specialize. Don't, just stay broad. And here's something that you may or may not love. Probably will love it. I don't know if our audience will. That's a fabulous way to close, because that ties, may not tie to the COA way, but as you know, Tony, COA is all about being the generalists. We don't typically go deep dive into technical stuff. We're more about the common thread issues for owners and their partners on every project, no matter whether it's a large hospital that might require thousands of sheets, or a small addition to a a higher ed campus, or anything else, or a Chick-fil-A restaurant or whatever. We're the generalists as well. So maybe that's why Tony Eck and COA have been such good friends and partners all these years. We could go another hour, but we are intending to keep these short, Tony. So we'll wrap it up there, unless you have any other parting words.
Well, I think the great thing about COA is the philosophy of a team approach, and approach of together we can go a lot further than if we're in our own camps and circling wagons. So I think that philosophy, of course, applied to almost any kind of building project, is a win-win-win for everybody. And that's why I love COA, and I'm flattered you called today, and I look forward to seeing you again before long.